Tales retold.
Thomas Davis. The constant stale and monotonous voice of the sleepy-eyed nurse pierced the quiet waiting room. A room lined with similarly tired people, sitting on uniformly black chairs. One individual slowly stood up and walked forward as the nurse led him into the doorway. Then, with barely a sound, the door sealed itself shut once again. The only noise now was the faint whirring of an unseen machine and the sound of the decaying walls creaking under their own weight. The walls were a faded green, with mold signaling where they touched the ancient gray carpet. The stench emanating from every edge of this hellhole was overwhelming. The small beige security camera keeping sentinel seemed more alive than any of the depressed shells of people. They kept their heads down. Right now, it was only men from age 25 all the way up to what looked like 80. Some were in slumber, others deep thought. Yet all were encompassed by a devastating, cataclysmic boredom, accompanied by the painful scratching of dread. At some point in the desolate hours, they would eye both the door from which they came and the door through which they would leave. The door into this place was painted a deep crimson, contrasting the fading and peeling old green paint of the walls. There was a peephole in the door, yet it was covered by a thin sheet of old rusted metal. The other door was heavier, and from its color and appearance was probably forged of steel. The heads of countless bolts were half buried in the door, and from how smoothly it opened and closed, must have been automated. It felt like years passed, though for all the men knew, it could have been mere seconds. Sleep and waking felt like one and the same. Not even dreams could help them escape this room. There was no light to depict night or day. No watches nor clocks. There was nothing at all to help them know how long they waited. The horrendous boredom was omnipresent, and every single man who ever entered or will ever enter this room is all too familiar with it. Yet finally, someone else was about to receive their relief. With a soft sound, the door swung open again, and the familiar nurse stood in the doorway. Once again, her monotonous call shattered the overwhelming silence. Another man stood up and silently followed the nurse back behind all sight and senses. The door sealed shut once more, and the footsteps faded, leaving only the whirring and creaking. Yet this time, a second man stood, and he faced the crimson door. His breaths were heavy, and a look of pure terror fogged over his eyes. Each step towards the door was shaky and uncertain. His hands gently twitched, and cold sweat softly dropped off of them. The man took one last, slow, deep breath, exiting the room. More hours of near silence melted into each other. Time unknowable passed. The stale air slowly grew to be suffocating. The uncomfortable seating slowly grew to become unbearably agonizing. The waiting men felt their wills being tested. The newest arrivals shifted uncomfortably, while the ancient veterans shook as plentiful beads of sweat rolled down their foreheads. They heard a door open, and they all silently prayed it was the nurse's door. They prayed the nurse was ready to accept another man out of the timeless horrors which encompassed them. Yet, it was the crimson door that opened once again. In its frame stood a man, a look of immense confusion washing over his face. His hair was a deep gray, depicting his old age. Yet his blue eyes shone clearly, as if to signal that age had not completely robbed him of youth. He was short and appeared almost emaciated. His white button shirt was 2 sizes too large for him, as were his denim pants, tied tightly to his waist by a plain leather belt. He slowly took one of the seats and started to read through a blue pamphlet in his hand. It was the same pamphlet that was now sitting underneath everyone else's seat. It looked new and glossy, unlike everything else in the room. The old man sat back in his seat and began to read.
Welcome to the waiting area, sir or madam. It is with great regret that we must impose some basic rules upon our honorable guests. The first rule is that you may not speak nor make any sounds. The second rule is that your head must face downwards until you are called upon. The third rule is that your body must remain seated upright in your chair at all times until you are called upon. The fourth rule is that your body must remain idle at all times until you are called upon. The fifth rule is that as soon as you finish reading this pamphlet, you must place it under your seat and never touch nor look at it again.
The pamphlet continued.
Don't worry, We understand your accommodations may appear less than satisfactory, yet with time, a trained assistant will come to your salvation. When you awoke, you likely found yourself confused, standing disoriented in the red doorway. However, we must state to you that this doorway will tempt you and will open easily for you at any time. We must warn you that this doorway leads to the polar opposite of what we offer for your patients. That's all you really need to know, sir or madam. We sincerely offer you the best of luck. Remember, your patience here is a small price to pay for your admission to heaven. Thank you, and welcome to Purgatory.